What's up, friends? This is a fantastic interview, but there's a lot of information and a lot of different visas that we discuss. So I put down below in the description and the top comment some links and more information. If you're serious about building a career in the US, definitely check that stuff out after watching. Anyway, appreciate you and hope this is helpful. Eileen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here. I know you've got a lot of knowledge that can be really helpful for people.
Well, thank you for having me. Um, so my name is Eileen DePra, and I was actually born and raised in South Korea, but I came to the
Hmm.
States as a student, foreign student. And I went to a little bit of high school and then college, and I went to law school in the States. And so I did
Hmm.
my own like immigration process while I was going to school. And
Wow.
now I'm an attorney, and in the last 5 years, I've been working with US employers trying to bring in foreign talents and also retain them within the company so they can grow with the talents they have, brought from outside of the US.
That is awesome. Yeah. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges a lot of talented foreign workers face. It's not just, can I get a job? It's, can I legally immigrate here? Because if,
Right.
if you can't figure out that step, you're not even in the running to to get an
And,
offer.
and a lot of people in the US, especially just regular folks, think immigration is quite simple.
Hmm.
Can you
Hmm.
not just come? Like, can you not just go get a visa and come? And the process is very complicated and it depends on your experience, your education, and the type of job that you're applying for. So it's really good to know
Hmm.
what you're looking for and work with the right people who can help you.
Totally agree. Yeah, yeah. So for people who are looking to immigrate but are unfamiliar with all the different types of visas out there, what are the most common types for foreign workers and maybe even Koreans specifically?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. So when we're talking about immigration to the US, we have to sort of distinguish between the non-immigrant visa and immigrant visa.
Okay.
And most of the people start with a non-immigrant visa, which allows you come to the US legally and work for like temporary period. Like there's a limit to how long you can stay and work. So there's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
cap and requirement for each categories that you apply for, as
Hmm.
opposed to immigrant visa is basically becoming a permanent resident and you can stay and work here permanently for any
Hmm.
employers.
Hmm.
A lot of times when you're here with a non-immigrant employment-based visas, you are a lot of times tied to the employer who filed the petition for you so that
Hmm.
there's a limit to where you can go, who you can work for. So the
Sure.
most common type is H-1B, which is a specialty occupation, which requires you to have at least bachelor's degree um, in a field that relates to the job that you're applying for. That's a very
Hmm.
common one.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
L1 would be intra-company like transfer. So you're bringing up, if you have an office in a different country and you have affiliate in the United States, then you can bring your employee to the US.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's another common one that people try to apply for. And there are other types too. I mean, we call it alphabet, pick your alphabet.
Yeah, yeah.
P's, there's, P's and O's. We can go through all that, but I think mainly the most thing that people should look forward to is either H-1B or L1. And if they want to eventually migrate to the US permanently, they probably want to look at like NIW um, or EB-1A, which is higher category that requires you to have like a publication that talks about your work um, in science, business, art, um, and IT, which
Hmm.
is a big one
Hmm.
right now.
Okay, so it sounds like for people that want to immigrate to the US or probably other Western countries as soon as possible, the the employee sponsored, the H-1B or the L-1, the transfer are probably the quickest ways to do that. Is that correct?
Do I want to say quick? I guess that depends on what's your definition of quick, you know? Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So they take a long time actually, a lot of times, because with an exception of TN, which is for Mexican and Canadian citizens,
Mhm.
all of the petition is required. It's need to start from the USCIS, which is in the US. So the employer will file the petition on your behalf, and it goes to the US immigration in the US, and they look at the process and they either approve or approve. If it gets approved, that petition goes to the US consulate in your home country,
Mhm.
right? So the part within USCIS takes sometimes, like depending on how busy they are, but it can take up to 3 to 8 months, that part alone. And you can pay extra to USCIS and have them adjudicate your petition within 15 business days. But I do think they cost 2805. That's extra filing fee you have to pay them to speed
Mhm.
up the process. Well, that's a chunk of money, but if you're willing to pay for that, I mean, I highly recommend it because it
Mhm.
does make it, really fast. And once that gets approved, it goes to the U.S. consulate in your home country, where you have to
Mhm.
go to um, like a visa interview, where they're going to ask questions about like what kind of job you're going to do, where you're going to work, all that. And
Mhm.
for Korea, the last time I checked, they're very efficient in terms of how fast they move. So it
Mhm.
only takes 2 to 3 days to make an appointment. But if you're from like India, for example, like you will probably have to wait 2 to 3 months just to book the appointment.
Mhm.
Yes, it depends on sort of where you are from and
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
interview you're doing. Yeah. A lot of people are doing directly NIW nowadays, national interest waiver, because that, if you get NIW approved, you can file I-140, which is an immigrant petition, right away. So when you come to the US, you're coming in as a green card holder, as opposed to visa status. So then
Mhm.
you actually skip whole non-immigration process, which can take a really long time. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that could save people years.
Oh, like 3 years, 5 years top. Yes.
Mhm.
And you don't have to, and then you can go work for anyone you want. You don't have to be tied to a
Mhm.
certain employer, sometimes who could um, use the fact that they're sponsoring you and
Mhm.
maybe not give you a promotion that you deserve because they don't want to pay you a higher wage. I mean, it goes both ways, but
Sure.
so one of the big application that we're doing right now for people who especially for Indian foreign candidates who has
Mhm.
to wait. I don't know if you know this, but like every country has like 7% of visas numbers available every year. So no matter how big
Mhm.
your country is, your country only gets 7% of the immigrant visa. So if you have
Mhm.
a number of people wanting to move to the United States, even if you have I-140 approved, you have to wait like 10 years to
Mhm.
get your immigrant
Mhm.
visa. But the types that I'm talking about, like NIW, does not have as much long wait. So those are moving faster, and a lot of people are going for that right now. So they don't have to wait
Got it.
as much.
Got it. Well, that's great to know. At least with the job seekers I work with, a big area of difficulty for them is just finding companies where the visa sponsorship is possible.
Right,
So if you're a job seeker on LinkedIn, on Indeed,
right,
and you're a foreigner trying to work in the US, how can you tell whether a company would sponsor your visa?
right. So sometimes it's easier to work with a smaller employer who wants to work with you as opposed to large companies like Amazon. Um,
Hmm.
and if you especially have like a personal relationship with that person, um, and that's probably an easier way to find an employer, but that's probably the toughest item that you have to check as a foreign um, employee or potential employee because it
Hmm.
does cost financially for the employers to sponsor you, and then your visa expires and you have to do a extension. That's another filing fees and legal fees
Hmm.
and all that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and a lot of times in my experience, for immigrants who who came to US and became an employer are more willing to work with you because they understand the process.
That's a great point. Yeah, yeah.
So if you're doing research for a company and then look for like CEO or somebody with foreign names, then
Hmm.
you could sort of like say, oh, I think that, and then, go through their LinkedIn profile and see like where they went to school. Then you can figure out like their history. Like, were they born in the US or do they have a history of immigration as well? So
Hmm.
that would be a good way to reach out. And I know there's some websites where they say they're going to help you find an employer who can sponsor you. But I don't want to say those names because sometimes they require you to pay them money um, for them to find job for you, and I don't think that's a smart way to go about because you end up with paying fees and at the end not necessarily finding a job. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, and then I've heard sometimes when they sort of like make some sort of a contract where they take portion of the pay that you were going to get, if you sort of like recruiters. So,
Hmm.
but if you
Hmm.
go to USCI's website, they have something called H-1B Hub that you can type it in, and it has all the like it shows the map of the United States, and you can use their filter that shows like all the names of the employers that filed H-1B since like up to 2024. And then you can find that way and then sort of check that list and see like, oh, what kind of companies filing H-1B for foreign workers. So that's a good option to find one if you're looking for an employer in the US who is willing to sponsor you. I mean, it's a long process, but we have to start from somewhere. And I think we could just find an employer and then check, one at a time and go from there.
Absolutely. I will definitely get a link from you. I'll put that in the description of this video.
Mhm.
So, for the audience watching, check on that database, see if a company's been registered as someone who could sponsor you. And when in doubt, just ask.
Right. They don't have to be registered to sponsor you. They have to be willing. If you are a U.S. employer and you haven't had any trouble with U.S. immigration in the past, it's convincing them to sponsor you because they can.
Hmm.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. Nice. When it comes to asking about visa stuff, who would you recommend reaching out to at a company? Would it be your potential hiring manager, a recruiter? Who do you think would be the best person to ask about that if you're researching the company and hoping to apply soon?
Um, Probably the HR or director of HR of the company. And we work with employers directly sometimes, but a lot of times we would work with HR directors directly because they are more familiar with the process and willing to help you and guide you, and make sure that once you're hired, you're on top of your a deadline with extensions, anything that needs to be refiled. So I think it'd be better to work with an HR, ask them directly, would you be willing to? And if you're a student here in the US, um, a lot of times that's the faster way finding employer who can sponsor for you. Like you attend conferences in your field, and then a lot of HR person shows up to like, hopefully find, potentially employees. So
Hmm. Hmm.
like if you're here in the US as a student, be part of like a club or attend, webinars or conferences that talks about or a presentation that relates to your work and try to meet as many people as possible, make connections. Yes, you never know that you can meet one person who you never will hear from them, but then they might meet someone who's looking for an employee. I mean, you never know. So I think
Hmm.
make yourself more presentable in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's just good advice in general
General, right?
for anyone looking for a job. Sometimes the opportunities they don't always go to the person who's actually the best fit.
Right,
If
right,
you've just been working alone in a corner by yourself, producing
exactly.
great results, but you never talk to anyone, you never promote
Yeah.
yourself,
No
it's
one's
going to
gonna
be
know how
way
amazing
harder
you
because
are. Right,
nobody knows what you offer. Yeah,
right, right. So you
yeah,
have to
yeah.
sort of like sell yourself, and that's probably the most difficult thing that especially Asian people has to go
Oh yeah.
through because
Hmm.
we're trained to be part of a group, don't stand out, follow the
Mm-hmm.
rules,
Mm-hmm.
do what the teachers say, as opposed to, but in the US, you sort of have to sell yourself.
You
Like,
have to
look
be an
at me.
individual. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And if you don't speak up, no one's going to come and find you and no one's going to know what you have accomplished. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to sort of like come out of your shell and put the
Mm-hmm.
light on you,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Complete, completely agree. I always really appreciate people like you who came from Korea and have built careers abroad, sending that message because I think when it
Yeah.
comes from you, it's even more obvious for people that yeah, you need to be your own biggest advocate and you're not being arrogant. You're telling companies what they want to hear and what they're looking for.
Right, that's exactly. It's still a challenge for me because how I was raised and grew up, but you
Mhm.
do need to speak for yourself and stand up for yourself. Um,
100%. Yeah, yeah. So kind of back to the visa stuff.
mhm.
What are, with the people you've worked with, some common mistakes when it comes to going through the visa process that can make it fail or make it take way longer than usual?
That's a very good question. So you wouldn't have a problem with that if you work with a good immigration attorney, but
Hmm.
it is important, especially when you're going to an interview, the information, they already have everything about you. What you have presented to the USCIS, they have that at the consulate, right?
Hmm.
So the information they have must match with the information that you already put out, like especially on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or your
Mm.
Facebook or whatever, you know, Instagram, whatever that might be. So, for
Hmm.
example, if you're going to an interview to work for like company ABC USA, that's what you're trying to do. But on your LinkedIn, you have already stated that I've been working for this company in the last 2 years. So that
Mm.
doesn't match. And I guarantee you, before you go to your interview, the US consulate is searching your social media presence, whether it's your LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and they have that
Okay.
information. So
Okay.
if they don't match up, then you're going to be in trouble and they will probably deny your application. So it's really
Mm.
important that what you present to social media nowadays matches up with what they have
Hmm.
information
Hmm.
about you on your immigration application. So that's really important. Yeah.
Great tip. So if you say a slightly different job title in your post on LinkedIn and but your immigration form says the official job title from the company,
That
that's a
could
great tip.
trigger.
Make
Yes.
sure everything you tell them and everything you share is the exact same.
Exact same thing. And another thing that you need to watch out is that when you're going to an um, immigration interview, especially for a non-immigrant, your intention is to return to your home once your visa is terminated. So your intention is not to go live in the US permanently, but just temporarily moving to US so that you can expand your career, right? So don't go
Hmm.
to the interview and say, so it's important for you to keep your ties at home. So like if you have a family members, if you have like savings or assets, they need to stay in your country. So don't go
Mm.
to your interview and say, oh, by the way, I sold all my stuff. Like I sold my house. I'm bringing all my savings.
Mm. Okay.
That you're actually permanently moving to the US as opposed to just going there for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to, work and, move up in my career.
Okay, got it. Even maybe if you are hoping to eventually move there
Exactly. So
permanently.
your intent is at the present time. Your intent can change. I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
I don't know what I want to eat. I want to eat something for breakfast, but then I change my mind. Your intent can
Sure.
change,
Yeah, yeah.
but at interview, because you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, your intent must be, I'm coming back to my home country once my visa is terminated, is your stand. Mhm.
Got it, got it. So let's say you go through all of that, you tell them that you get the visa, you love it here, and you want to extend.
Mhm.
Whether that's as a grad student or as a non-immigrant worker, what's the process for visa extension once you're already here?
Right. So that's a really good question as well. So every visa has a limitation of how long you can stay in the US.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what we tell our clients is if your intention is to stay longer or permanently live here and even like start a family, then you need to start your process as soon as possible. So you have to talk to your employer and say, you know, I want to work here for a long time permanently, then they can file something called I-140. That's an immigrant petition for alien worker. So that's where the immigrant petition comes in.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you need to talk to your employer about that. And if you um, don't have an employer, there's other options, which is NIW, which is National Interest Waiver. That's reserved for people who's doing a work that actually serves for the national interest of the United States. You don't need an employer for that. EB1A,
Hmm.
yes, EB1A is also another category where you don't need an employer. That's when you work at a STEM, business, art, and you're at like top 1%, you can apply for that as well. Or
Hmm.
another option would be something called E2, which is that's a non-immigrant visa, but it's an investor visa where you can start a business in the US. And you can extend it as long as possible, as long as you're making money and hiring US employees. So there are
Hmm.
many options that you can look you can look forward to
That is
find the
awesome.
right one. But it's important that you talk to an immigration attorney and tell them what you want, and then they can find the right category for you, depending on your experience and your education and what you're looking for.
Excellent advice. Yeah. A couple times you've mentioned work with an immigration attorney. How does someone get started doing that?
So immigration is a federal law. So in the United States, for example, if you're doing a family law, you're sort of restricted to your state because that's family law is state law.
Hmm.
But like with immigration, like federal tax, it's federal law. So if you're
Hmm.
looking for an immigration attorney, it doesn't really matter where they're practicing from,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
our petition goes to the federal government anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so you can hire an attorney any state in the U.S. Um, and I mean, there's a lot out there.
yeah, yeah.
And and you know, a lot of them in the beginning would give you probably like a free consultation of like 30 minutes or so and sort of review your resume and your education credentials and your prior experience to see what would the perfect category for you. But
Mhm.
number one thing is finding an employer who is willing to sponsor you, unless you fall into the categories where you don't need a employer.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, it's important to find an employer first. And most of the time, we work with the employer directly
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they are the one who's filing on your behalf. So um, technically, they would be our client because they're filing the petition on behalf of the potential employee.
Got it, got it.
Yeah, some employers don't like us even communicating with the employee because there's a lot of confidential information they don't want to share with the potential
Mm,
employee.
maybe, yeah.
For example, their financial status. So we mostly work with the employer directly. So unless you're filing a petition that does not require an employer, um, our communication goes to the employer. But if you're filing EB1A or NIW, then we directly work with the employee.
Got it, got it. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and insight, Eileen. Where can people follow you or get connected with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I just typed in my name. Apparently, I'm the only Eileen Duprat
Okay,
on
perfect,
LinkedIn.
perfect. And I'll put your link down below,
So that
just
you can
in
connect.
case another Eileen DePra pops up. But yeah, yeah,
And then my email works as well. I think you have my email.
I
My
do.
email.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that works as well. So um,
perfect.
I hope this was helpful.
I think it definitely was. Yeah, I really appreciate your time, Eileen. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.